I swear the air changed the moment she walked in, heavier, slower, like the room itself remembered to breathe only when she did. She wasn't supposed to be here that night. Neither was I. I was just filling in for a friend, a favor that turned into a beginning I never saw coming. And then she appeared, with her quiet grace and that calm, unbothered kind of confidence that made everyone around her forget what they were doing. She was older, you could tell by the stillness in her eyes, by the way she carried her silence like it belonged to her. And yet, there was something raw underneath it. Something unguarded, even if she'd never admit it. I told myself to look away. I didn't. She caught me staring, once, twice, and didn't say anything. Just this faint, knowing smile that felt less like an invitation and more like a test. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, steady, the kind that doesn't need to be raised to be heard. "You're new here," she said. "Yeah," I managed, trying to sound casual. "Just helping out." Her eyes lingered on me for a heartbeat too long. "Helping out," she repeated, almost amused. Then she looked away, but not before I noticed her hand brush the counter beside mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin in the air between us. It was ridiculous, how aware I became of every small sound after that: the quiet hum of the ceiling fan, the faint clink of glass, the soft rustle of her sleeve as she leaned in to reach something. The world had shrunk down to the space between us, and neither of us seemed ready to step back. "Careful," she said once, when our fingers almost touched. There was a smile tugging at her lips, but her tone wasn't playful, it was a warning. "I am," I said. But I wasn't. There was a pause, the kind that stretches just long enough to feel like confession. She looked at me again, softer this time. "Don't fall for me," she said. The words came out so naturally, like she'd said them before, to someone else, maybe. Or maybe just to herself. And I wanted to laugh, to tell her she didn't have to worry. But I couldn't. Because the truth was already there, sitting heavy in my chest. The way her hand brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. The way she looked away right when I wanted her to keep looking. The way she filled the silence, not with words but with presence. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something that could become it, given the wrong night and too much courage. She noticed my hesitation and turned slightly toward me, her voice quieter now. "You think I'm joking," she said. "No," I whispered. "I think you're serious." Her eyes met mine, not sharp, not distant, just impossibly human. "Good," she said. "Then maybe you'll listen." But neither of us moved. There was only the faint scent of her perfume, something soft and unfamiliar, and the space that kept daring to close between us. And then, the sound of footsteps. A door opening. Someone calling her name from the hallway. She straightened, just a fraction, but it was enough. The spell broke. She gave me one last look, a quiet, unreadable one, and then she said, almost under her breath, "This didn't happen." But I already knew it had. And as she walked away, her voice, her warning, her warmth stayed behind, and I was still standing there, wondering how not to fall for her when she'd already left me halfway there. I didn't expect to see her again. But a week later, she walked back into the same space, same hour, same quiet rhythm of night, as if the universe hadn't finished what it started. She looked different this time. Not in the way she dressed, but in the way she carried herself. Less guarded, maybe? Or maybe I was just paying better attention. She smiled, that same small, deliberate smile, and said, "You're still here. Guess I didn't scare you off," I replied, half teasing, half trying to sound unaffected. Her eyes flickered, amused. "You almost did." We stood there, the silence between us heavier than the words we avoided. She set down her bag on the counter close enough that her hand brushed mine by accident, or on purpose. I couldn't tell anymore. I learned her name that night. Elena. It suited her, elegant but hard to hold on your tongue. She told me she taught literature, though she spoke like someone who'd lived the stories she read. Her marriage had ended years ago. No kids. Just a quiet apartment, a cat she didn't like admitting she spoiled, and a tendency to stay late at work because home feels too still. I listened more than I spoke, maybe because I didn't know what to say, or maybe because her voice felt like something I shouldn't interrupt. When she asked about me, I almost lied. But I didn't. Not much to tell, I said. Still figuring things out. Mostly making mistakes. She looked at me then, really looked. Good, she said softly. You're supposed to at your age. At your age. It should have sounded harmless. It didn't. Because in that moment, we both realized what sat between us, not just distance measured in years, but the kind that's harder to name. I caught myself watching her hands as she spoke, the faint lines at her knuckles, the silver glint of a ring she no longer wore. She noticed. I knew she did, because she stopped mid-sentence and tucked her hands under her arms. You do that a lot, she murmured. Do what? Watch me like you're memorizing something. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned to refill her glass, anything to move, to breathe, but she reached out and stopped me. Just her fingers brushing my wrist. Barely a touch, but enough to make the world tilt. For a second, either of us moved. Then she pulled back, her expression softening. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. How should I look at you? She didn't respond, just exhaled, slow and careful, her breath grazing my skin like the end of a thought. The air between us changed again, like it always did when she was near. And then, without quite meaning to, she said, You remind me of someone. Someone you miss? She hesitated. Someone I shouldn't have missed. Our eyes met, not by accident this time. No one said a word after that. We just stood there, in the quiet, the world outside forgotten. Her hand found mine, briefly, deliberately, and then let go. But that one touch felt like a promise either of us should have made, and both of us already had. It was raining that night, the kind that makes everything sound closer than it should. Elena had stayed late again. I found her sitting by the window, watching the streetlights blur through the glass, a half-empty mug of tea cooling beside her. She didn't hear me come in. Or maybe she did, and pretended not to. You'll catch a cold, I said quietly. She smiled without looking at me. You sound older than you are. I feel older when I talk to you. That made her turn. And when she did, her expression softened just enough to make me forget what I'd meant to say. She looked tired, not from the day, but from the weight of something she wouldn't name. I shouldn't be here, I said. Then why are you? The question lingered in the air, heavier than the rain outside. I could have said anything, that I wanted to see her, that I didn't know how to stop, but the words stuck somewhere between my throat and my heart. Instead, I walked closer. Too close. She didn't move. Her eyes followed me, steady, unreadable. The space between us felt smaller than ever, full of everything we'd been pretending not to feel. You should go, she whispered finally. I know. But neither of us did. Her hand brushed the edge of the table as she stood, her fingers grazing mine for the briefest moment. It was enough to burn through the quiet. Elena, don't, she said, but her voice broke halfway through the word. Why not? Because you're making this harder. And then, footsteps. Someone outside the door. A voice calling her name. She froze, eyes wide, breath caught. I stepped back, heart pounding. Who is it? I whispered. My colleague, she said quickly. He was supposed to drop something off. Her voice trembled, just a little. Not fear, something else. She straightened her blouse, ran a hand through her hair, and crossed to the door. When she opened it, her tone changed completely, calm, professional, untouched. I stood still, hidden just out of view, listening as they exchanged a few words. Then the door shut again, and she leaned against it, eyes closed. You should really go now, she said softly. I should, I echoed. But my feet didn't move. When she looked up, her composure cracked. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, or stop herself from saying everything. The rain outside grew louder. I took a step forward. Then another. Until she was close enough that I could see the tiny reflection of the window light in her eyes. Her hand lifted, maybe to push me away, maybe to hold on. I couldn't tell. Our faces were inches apart. And for one suspended heartbeat, I thought she'd let it happen, the thing we'd been circling around for weeks. But then she whispered, barely audible. "This can't happen." "Then why are you still here?" I asked. Her breath caught, and that was the last sound either of us made before the lights flickered, and the storm outside swallowed the silence whole. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. The air between us did it for us. The storm had passed, but the quiet it left behind felt worse. Days went by with no messages, no accidental meetings. I tried to tell myself it was over, that whatever had begun between us had dissolved back into the silence it came from. But then she showed up again. Not at the cafe. Not at work. At my door. I didn't even have time to think before I opened it. She stood there, raincoat half-buttoned, hair damp from the drizzle, eyes carrying something between apology and defiance. "I shouldn't have come," she said. "But you did." She hesitated on the threshold, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. "You didn't answer my message. I didn't know what to say." She stepped inside anyway. The smell of rain followed her in, sharp, clean, alive. For a long moment either of us spoke. The distance between us was small, but every inch of it felt charged, alive with everything we hadn't said. Her eyes flicked to my hand, then back to my face. "You make it hard to think straight," she murmured. "I could say the same about you." She gave a soft, nervous laugh, the kind that ends too quickly. "You don't know what you're doing." "Then tell me." Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. Instead, she ran a hand through her hair, rain-cooled strands falling across her cheek. Without thinking, I reached up and brushed them aside. The touch was small. Barely there. But it changed everything. She froze. Her breath caught. My hand lingered a moment too long against her skin, feeling the warmth of her pulse beneath my fingertips. "Elena," I said quietly. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like it means something." But her voice trembled, and when she looked at me again, I saw every wall she'd built start to crack. "I've spent years keeping distance," she said softly. "From people. From this." "Then stop." She shook her head. "You think it's that simple?" I took a step closer. "It could be." Her eyes fluttered shut when I spoke, as if the sound alone was too much. When she opened them again, they were glassy, searching. "You shouldn't want me," she whispered. "Too late." Her hand lifted, just slightly, pressing against my chest. She could have pushed me away, but she didn't. Instead, she stood there, feeling my heartbeat, fast, unsteady, real. I leaned in, close enough that I could feel her breath on my lips. "Tell me to stop," I said. She didn't. The silence stretched until it became a confession of its own. Her hand slipped from my chest to my shoulder, gripping it lightly, as if she'd already lost the fight she never wanted to win. Then, a sharp knock on the door. She flinched, breath catching. Neither of us moved. The knock came again. She met my eyes, and in that single look, everything unsaid was spoken. "Don't open it," she whispered. And just like that, the world outside ceased to matter. The knock on the door faded, but its echoes stayed long after the footsteps disappeared. Elena stood frozen in the dim light of my apartment, one hand still near the doorknob, the other pressed to her chest like she was trying to calm something that wouldn't quiet down. When she finally turned to me, the look in her eyes wasn't fear. It was something sharper. "I shouldn't have come here," she said again. But this time, it sounded less like guilt and more like defense. "You keep saying that," I murmured. "And you keep coming back." Her breath hitched. "You think I want this?" "No," I said softly. "I think you can't help it." For a second, the space between us trembled, the air too heavy to breathe, too fragile to move through. Then she laughed, low and tired. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me what I don't know. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, until I could smell the faint trace of rain still clinging to her hair. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table, tracing circles on the wood to keep from shaking. I wasn't married, she said finally. The words landed between us like glass breaking. What? She looked up at me, eyes shining with something raw. You asked before? I told you I was divorced. It was easier to say that then. She stopped, swallowing hard. Then what? I was someone's secret, she said quietly. For years. The confession hung there, heavy and real. I told myself I'd never do that again, she continued. Never be the reason someone lies to themselves. Her voice cracked then, small, almost lost. And now here I am. Doing it again. I didn't know what to say. Every instinct told me to step closer, to reach for her, but something in her stillness warned me not to. Elena. She shook her head. Don't. Please. Not right now. But when she brushed past me toward the door, her shoulder grazed mine, and that one accidental touch undid everything she was trying to hold together. She stopped. So did I. You think I'm like him? She whispered. I turned. No. I think you're trying not to be. Her hand trembled at her side, and she exhaled, a shaky, uneven sound that didn't match the composure she tried to wear. I should go, she said. Then why aren't you moving? Her gaze lifted slowly, and there it was again, that same pull that never really left, the one that made everything dangerous and inevitable at once. I don't know how to stop, she admitted. And when she said it, her voice broke in the middle, the kind of break that isn't weakness, just truth. We stood there, silence thick enough to hear each other breathe. I reached out, not to pull her closer, but to steady her hand where it trembled against her side. My thumb brushed her wrist, gentle, almost reverent. Her pulse leapt under my touch. She looked at me like she already knew what would happen next, like the decision had been made long before tonight. Then don't stop, I said quietly. Her eyes closed, and she whispered, You don't understand what that means. Then show me. And for the first time, she didn't step back. The rain had stopped by the time she came back. I'd left the door unlocked, maybe out of hope, maybe out of something I couldn't name. When it creaked open, I didn't even turn around. I knew it was her. Elena, I said softly. She didn't answer right away. I could hear her set her keys down, hear the faint rustle of fabric as she exhaled, steadying herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was lower than usual. You shouldn't have said that last time. Said what? Then don't stop. She stepped closer. I could feel her before I saw her, the air warming, tightening around us. I meant it, I said. She laughed barely. You always mean it. That's what makes it dangerous. I turned then, slowly. She was standing a few feet away, but it felt like no distance at all. Her hair was still damp from the mist outside, her eyes darker than I remembered. What are we doing? She asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. There was something in her tone, a plea, a warning both at once. I took a step forward. She didn't move. Another step, and we were close enough for me to see the tiny freckles near her collarbone, the quick rise and fall of her breath. Her hand lifted between us, not to stop me this time, just to hover near my chest, like she needed proof I was really there. You don't have to be afraid, I said quietly. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm not afraid of you. What then? Of what it'll mean if I let this happen. Her words trembled, but her body didn't move away. I reached up, my fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. She closed her eyes at the touch, just for a second, then opened them again, and everything unspoken between us became unbearably clear. Elena, don't say it, she whispered. Why not? Because if you say it, I'll believe you. Her voice cracked then, soft and raw. She leaned forward, almost unconsciously, until our foreheads nearly touched. The scent of rain and her perfume mixed with the faint warmth of her breath. "I've spent years staying safe," she said. "And I never felt alive doing it. Then don't be safe tonight." Her eyes searched mine, not for permission, but for something truer. And whatever she found there must have been enough, because she didn't pull away. She reached for my hand, guiding it slowly to her cheek. Her skin was warm, her pulse steady beneath it. "This will ruin me," she whispered. "Then let it ruin me too." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of everything we'd tried to resist, everything we'd been too careful to name. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. She leaned in, so close that I could feel her lips brush mine, not a kiss yet, just a question waiting to be answered. And in that single breath, we both knew, whatever came next, either of us would ever be the same. Morning crept in softly, slow and pale against the window. Elena sat beside me on the couch, wrapped in a blanket she'd pulled from the armrest. The world outside still smelled like rain, washed clean, uncertain. Neither of us had spoken much since the night before. Words felt too heavy for something that had already said itself. Her hair fell over her face, half shadowed in the weak light. I wanted to reach out, tuck it back behind her ear, but I didn't. Not yet. She was the one who finally broke the silence. "So," she said quietly, "this is what it feels like, doing the wrong thing for the right reason." I smiled, a little sad. "Does it still feel wrong?" She thought about that, tracing invisible lines on the coffee mug between her hands. "Maybe just complicated. I can live with complicated." Her eyes lifted then, soft and searching. "You say that now." There was no tension this time, no unspoken rule hanging in the air. Just the calm that comes after something inevitable finally happens, when everything you've tried to resist becomes something you can finally touch. "I kept thinking about what people would say," she admitted. "About the difference between us. And now?" She shrugged, a small smile forming. "Now it feels like maybe they don't get a say." I reached over, brushing my thumb across her wrist. "They don't?" She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned her head against my shoulder, letting out a long, quiet breath. "You make things harder," she murmured. "I make them honest," I said. She laughed softly at that, the kind of laugh that feels like relief more than amusement. For a while, we just sat there, the only sound the steady rhythm of the clock and her breathing against me. The world outside had started moving again, cars, footsteps, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, but it all felt far away. Her hand found mine beneath the blanket, her fingers slipping between mine like they were always meant to fit there. "I used to think love was supposed to make sense," she said. "That it should look right to everyone else. And now?" I asked again. She looked up at me, eyes clear, steady. "Now I think maybe it just has to feel right to the two people living it." I nodded, and for the first time since we met, she didn't look away. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic kiss. Just closeness, her leaning into me, her warmth against mine, her hand tightening slightly as if anchoring herself to something real. When I finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. "You told me not to fall for you." Her smile was quiet, knowing. "And you didn't listen. Would you have?" She shook her head. "No." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, thin and hesitant, but enough. And in that light, for the first time, it didn't feel like we were doing something wrong. It just felt like we'd stopped pretending not to want something honest. Elena turned slightly, pressing her forehead to mine, a soft exhale between us. "Then I guess," she whispered, "we stop running." And in that stillness, with her hand in mine and the morning around us, everything finally made sense. Not perfect, not easy, but real.